Me think it's all good. It was crazy how time flew when you thought I never knew. But now, baby, look at you. This is all cause of you. Yeah. Put the brakes, but I can't stop. You wanna style like a mascot? Was all I gave to you, got caught. And now I'm feeling like a free man. She always fishing like a seaman. She looking at it like a pecan. Cause it's always in season. Yeah. You burn all the bridges you rode. I gave you my heart and it broke. I took it all back, but I'm gone. Yeah. They dropped in the city explorer. She's out in the whip and it's forward. Yeah. I just had to get emotionally lost. Last time I felt the pain, I don't remember the cost. But I know I'ma be okay. Tell me that, but I ain't fading away.
So tell me when the hell you come through for all of your stuff. Cause I really wanna tell you, but I'm breaking heart and you do not trust. I knew that you were holding out. I knew the truth before the lies.
Let me fix up. Unforgivable, lying to my damn face, got you feeling cynical. I was at the pinnacle, what was going wrong? Fucking knew it all along. Let me think it's all good. It was crazy how time flew when you thought I never knew. But now we can look at you. This is all cause of you.
Take it
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody, and welcome. Holy cow. Holy cow. It feels like it has been forever since I have seen you and you have seen me, and boy, have I missed you. It is Friday morning, which means that we have our lovely coffee mug full of chai tea going on. I'll get into that here in a little bit. I am rocking my Yellowstone mug. I heard that they were going to, I heard somewhere that Kevin Costner was going to continue on with the series, and so I'm very grateful for that. I'm feeling very Yellowstoney this morning with that one. We are streaming live across a multitude of platforms. I'll get into that in a little bit. I saw somebody talking about asking that question inside chat. Welcome, everybody, to the October 11th episode of Security Data Operations. This is our bi-monthly stream where we talk about everything security operations, data operations, really kind of the convergence of the two in the modern day cybersecurity team. Special note, this is a Friday. You can already tell that the caffeine is hitting the veins and the heart and the mind super fast. And so this will also double. As our Tea with a Hacker. We'll do our Tea with a Hacker stream kind of following kind of the SecDataOps stuff. You know what happens when I got SecDataOps in the morning? That's because we got a special guest from the UK. We always try to accommodate our guests in the UK in the morning. And so you'll be excited to kind of see our UK guest this morning. Thank you very much for the love on the shirt. Yes, this is my golf shirt. Special surprise, our guest today also likes golf as well. You'll see it in his background here in a little bit. So stay tuned. Make sure you stay tuned for Tea with a Hacker right after we get done with our guest today. Let's hit the rules really fast, and then I'll introduce my guest here, right? So first and foremost, rule number one, right? Zero toxicity. What does that mean? No racist, sexist, misogynistic, or otherwise toxic behavior in chat at all whatsoever across any of the platforms that we are streaming across. We do have mods in chat, and they'll make no qualms out of utilizing that ban button in the respective channels. Mods are not here, however, to stifle chat in any way whatsoever. As a matter of fact, that leads us to kind of like the second rule, or more of a reminder. We love questions. One of the primary values that comes from this stream being live. I appreciate everybody who watches, the thousands of folks who watch these VODs, whether they're on YouTube or Twitch or the shorts that my awesome social media team puts together. You're all obviously always welcome to watch the VODs, but one of the prime values that comes from this stream being live is it's one of the only places that you can get the benefit of being able to ask myself or my guest questions in real time and get those answers. So we highly encourage questions throughout the stream, instead of waiting for a dedicated Q&A to happen. That way you can kind of get the benefit of getting them live. Case in point, this question right here, right? Is this stream on other platforms? Yes. We do this stream live across LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitch, Instagram, X, and TikTok. I want to say hi to all of our viewers across all those platforms. I keep looking over there because unfortunately, like, this is where I see my TikTok and my Instagram folks. So hi waving to my TikTok and my Instagram folks. We do stream across all of those platforms. At any point in time, we are paying attention to the chat, and we do love the questions across all those platforms. So with that being said, chat across all the platforms. Put your hands together across LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitch, Instagram, X, and TikTok for my good friend, Simon Johnson. Simon, welcome to the SecDataOps stream. How the hell are you, sir?
I'm not too bad, thank you, Neal. Wow, what a warm and energetic start to the day for you. Okay.
This is very typical for Friday. Like, I understand that we're probably standing between you and a pub visit shortly after this, and so we'll try to make the absolute best use of your time.
No worries. No. Pleasure to be here. I don't think I've ever been on so many platforms at exactly the same time. I don't think many people have, actually, frankly. So I'm slightly daunted by that. Go easy on.
It's okay. We'll have a good time now. I always like to brag about our guest history, and you've got a really, really long history in security. And so I just want to highlight that for my viewers really fast, right? You've done a couple years at Splunk, which I'm sure a lot of my viewers are very familiar with, and their role in the SIEM industry and security operations as a whole. But you've also spent time at FireEye. For those who don't remember, FireEye was a long-standing leader when it came to network detection and response and a lot of the stuff there. You were kind of their director of global services and intelligence there. You were at BAE Systems. You spent 9 years at Cisco, which Cisco seems to be all over the place when it comes to security. I think people usually think of Cisco and they think of things like networking and stuff like that, but they forget about Talos and whatnot. But you worked in various security practices there. You also spent time at Qualys, which for those who don't know is a vulnerability management vendor. So you did time there at Qualys as well. So you've got a ton of security experience. And today you're CEO and founder of Hoop Cyber. What are you doing these days?
Well, when you say it like that, it makes me feel much older than I actually am. Yeah, I'm 2024 is my 25th year working in our fantastic industry, and of course, anyone who's been around as long as I have in it knows that no one cared at all what I did for the first 15 years of my career. It's only the last 10 years or so where people have paid attention. But no, we're just having a great time, really. I wanted to set up my own business for a really long time. I've had that kind of entrepreneurial itch that I think a lot of people might be able to relate to, and you have to pick the right time to do these sort of things. And I could see a few things going on in the industry that I thought were really interesting and a bit concerning. And it just felt like the right time. So coming up to 2 years now of running Hoop. Couldn't be more proud of where we've got to in such a short space of time. And having a lot of fun trying to do it.
That's awesome, and I love what you said there, right? Like for the first 15 years, and I hope everybody listens to this, right? Because for the first 15 years, when you're working in the industry, that's right, nobody listens to you, but they'll listen to you as a consultant. I love telling this story because when I was transitioning from PwC to Abbott, I was consulting for Abbott as a PwC consultant. I remember the CISO there. We would have conversations ad nauseum. What are you seeing here? What are you seeing there? What do you think about this? What do you think about that? And then as soon as I became an employee, he stopped asking me those questions. And I was like, I didn't just suddenly lose that knowledge.
Yeah. That's the way it goes. But there we are.
So the moral of the story, audience, is if you want to be listened to, go be in consulting.
Yeah. Well, people think your opinion is more valuable when they're having to pay you a lot for it.
Right. That's actually probably the most true statement ever. So you've seen your share of security technologies. You've seen your share of security operations strategies. We're going to get into that in a little bit. Congratulations on an awesome career. Very, very prestigious. When you look back on your career and you think about your 25 years in this lovely industry you talk about, what would you say has been your biggest takeaway from the shifts in cybersecurity industry over those last 25 years?
Whew, wow. I'm not quite sure how to answer that, Neal. I mean, takeaways have been enormous. I mean, like if I think about starting off with Qualys, I mean, no one was using a SaaS platform for security vulnerability detection or identification, right? Going and talking to a customer about the principle of that was like being someone who was trying to explain what a fax machine was in the 80s, right? It was just, people didn't get the idea that actually a community effect of having vulnerability insight across a vast amount of data sets, sharing it all together, updating that data set once so everybody benefited rather than sending you a CD-ROM with a software update. I mean, like that was a massive game changer for me. And so I was working there in 2004, which was a really interesting time for the whole SaaS market. Yeah. And pretty much the only thing people could relate to was that they would use Salesforce for as a CRM, right? Mm-hmm. People got the idea that made sense, but security products, definitely not. So that was really interesting. I think then just how much data people have got it's got to be like the other takeaway, right? Just the complexity and vastness of data wrangling that's going on now to try and achieve something that should basically be pretty simple. Am I okay or not, right? That has got to be a significant takeaway. And that's kind of where I've ended up later on in my career, really worrying about that kind of thing.
No, I think that's fair, and I had the data conversation a little bit later on in what I wanted to talk with you. But since you hopped on it, let's go ahead and let's dive into that just a little bit. I just got back, and for my audience who didn't know, I spent a couple weeks, last 3 weeks on the road doing various types of talks and whatnot. 3 weeks ago, I was in San Diego and I was in Southern California, giving talks at a couple different events, and as I was chatting with the audience, there was definitely a conversation around that blow up, if you will, of security data, and basically the vast amount of data that it took for security operations teams to be effective. And we talked about like cloud first strategies, and we talked about like just with AI coming about, just the sheer volume of data that's needed to be successful in a lot of these AI industries. Do you think, I'm gonna change the question on you here just a little bit when it comes to security data? Do you think that we have a security data problem?
Probably, I think is probably is the answer, right? And the reason I say probably is because there are ways to solve the data problem, but they're mostly ways that are very, very complicated or very expensive to do, right? So when you think about a customer or an organization or your business where you may have 20, 30 terabytes worth of security logging data that you need to inspect every day, how do you collect that? How do you possibly store that in a way that is affordable to do so? How do you tag all that data in a way that means you can search it and query it? That is a I think that's the problem, right? Is how do you working out how to do that? It's not that there aren't answers to how you would solve those problems. That's not where I'm coming from when I say that I think that there is still a problem.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually the defining it and working out how you're going to address it, right? And being able to afford to.
Do you think that when you think about a problem, if you will, when it comes to data, what do you think has been like? We oftentimes think about data. When I think about data as a problem for security teams, it's the choice that I think most teams struggle with, right? What do I mean by that is they have to make a decision about where to go for data, how to balance, which data that they need to make decisions quickly. I think that teams have become data saturated, especially security operations teams, security analysts, incident responder teams. They've become data saturated, and they don't know how to rapidly move through the data challenges to get to the answers that they need. Would you say that that's something you're seeing as well?
100%. 100%. It's it's kind of it's screen time overload, right? It's all the chaos and the noise. That's really the thing I hear about all day, every day, right? We've got the data, we just don't know where is that needle in the haystack.
How did we get here? Like I know I have my thoughts on this. When you look back on your years and you talk to the clients that you talk to, how did we get to this data problem that we have here?
So it's a really good question. And I'm not sure whether this is the right answer, but this is definitely a perspective, right? So having worked in the industry for a long time, like I said, the first years I went to RSA or I went to any of the big security conferences, for a start, there were hardly any people there, right? In working in London, I probably knew about 20 people who would genuinely call themselves a chief information security officer or a chief security officer as it was then, right? So it was a pretty small market. It was a pretty small industry that was trying to solve basic problems linked to antivirus and real simple challenges. And as technology has evolved and as customers and businesses have moved to adopt technology further, so has the potential threat landscape, right? I think there's no denying it. All that stuff is just fundamentally the case. But what's happened with that as well is the security industry has seen an injection of investment like no other industry that I've ever been in.
Yes.
Right? Okay. So, you look at an organization or a company I work with that maybe has 100 security tools. Well, they're all chatting. They're all making noise. They're all doing good, interesting, and respectful things, but they create the vastness of the data.
Yeah.
So we could definitely blame the VCs and the investors, and we can also definitely blame the the individuals purporting all the challenges we worry about. But ultimately, we've all gone along with this story, right?
Yeah.
We feel more vulnerable. We feel more at risk. If somebody can sell me something that's going to help me understand that, well, I'm going to buy it, right? But then every single one of those things I buy that solves a little problem creates another little niche of data.
Mm-hmm.
And if I don't do something with that data, what the hell was the point in buying it in the first place?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's where it comes from, right? It's that analogy that you could maybe solve your security requirements with like 5 cool things 25 years ago, but today you need an army of both data engineers and tooling and all the rest of it to reflect the fact that everything is just much more complex.
So while we're blaming people, I want to take an opportunity to blame the marketing folks. And since I know that he'll watch this stream on VOD anyway, because he's out doing a marathon this morning, we can blame Matt Anthony. We'll tell him that next time on the call that we blamed him and his entire cohort of marketing folks. Because I do agree with you, right? Like every marketer in cybersecurity, says that their problem solves everything short of slicing the bread for you, right?
Yeah.
That's always been my challenge when I was a buyer of technology at a lot of these large organizations, is that the pitch that lands in my inbox is always the same. I will solve every security problem for you. It's been nothing short of just infuriating to me as a practitioner and as a buyer.
Yeah. I can't, and now it's tagged with and by the way, we have an AI co-pilot as well. And if there's no AI or Gen AI somewhere in it, then no one's interested. And that also is a problem that is purported by the people who are investing in building these businesses.
So let me play the devil's advocate on the investment side here a little bit, right? I want to pivot to the technology, but let's talk about the investment side a little bit. Investment is important for innovation, true or false?
Completely. But just because one innovation worked doesn't mean we need 20 more of the same thing that looks and sounds the same, but is trying to solve the problem in a different kind of way. So here's what I mean by that. In the process of setting up a business, running a company, all these fun things that I'm learning on the day job every day with my own business, we meet and talk to investors, whether it be private investors, VCs, all sorts of different organizations, right? Because we work with the companies they represent, and also we're interested in having a good relationship with them. If you go and talk to them about what they're looking to invest in, they're all looking for exactly the same thing. And it is something that's driven by AI, or it's something that is going to solve a significant environmental challenge, right? If it's in cyber, it's all about AI. If it's outside of cyber, it's pretty much, we want to solve an environmental challenge. And so what that's creating is 20 or 30 companies that are all really well funded, that are all trying to go do exactly the same thing. And that doesn't help anybody. And that's why you end up with that same message in your inbox from 20 different people saying they've worked out how to solve your problem. That's not innovation. That's just repetition, right? So yes, I definitely agree with you, but it takes quite a bold investor to say, I really like the idea of what you're trying to do there, right? We've invented a sandbox, right? Think about what FireEye did when they first came to market.
Yeah.
Something completely different, something completely new. Or like myself, right? I worked, I don't know if you knew, we recently passed away, Philippe Courtois, the CEO of Qualys.
Yeah.
I worked directly for him. He was bankrolling the business at the time because he believed that a SaaS-based cybersecurity solution was the right way. But he couldn't borrow money from anybody. None of the investment community was interested in supporting him. He did it off his own bat, because actually that's where the innovation was going to come from. So I think it's a mix, honestly, Neal. I think it's a mix. I think it will always enable innovation to a certain extent. Yeah. But smart people. I guess
I feel it's a necessary evil, right? And I guess this is where my take is on this, right? You have to put money into the idea that the market's going to shift around you. To your point about Qualys and SaaS-based innovation, right? Nobody would lend him money because that innovation felt like it was too extreme for the marketplace. But as soon as he started to get traction, as soon as Qualys started to prove that a SaaS-based vulnerability management platform was indeed working for them, you saw a massive amount of money come into the marketplace, and that massive amount of money coming into the marketplace propelled the further innovation of that space. And so while I give it cynicism, and while I do think that injection of capital creates 15 companies that are all with the same marketing pitch that lands in my inbox, I do think that capitalistic race for innovation is key to us staying ahead of the threat actors. That's my take on it.
So that I completely agree with.
Yeah.
End of. Completely agree with you. Because without that, we're not going to get any. Yeah, you don't get anywhere without without that. So yeah, fair enough.
All right, cool. Look at that. You see that chat? That's how you have civil discourse right there. Speaking of technologies, like that was a little bit of a pivot. I didn't have that one on the schedule to talk about, but it is a nice segue to talk about technologies. And again, back to kind of, your years of experience and what you're seeing with clients now at Hoop. Let's get down to some fundamentals, especially when it comes to the security operations team. Can you break down for the audience what you think are key components to running a successful security operations team?
Yeah, sure. That is in my wheelhouse, as you might imagine, Neal. So not a problem at all. I think where we've seen some really, really interesting and dynamic changes to the way that people are fundamentally looking to detect threats, right, within their security operations capability. I think the challenge with the existing SIEM market being, in essence, both an enabler and a challenger to being able to ingest and query vast amounts of data has caused an issue where customers are looking to do something a bit different, right? And that something a bit different is what we call, a modernized SOC environment. And for us, a modernized SOC environment kind of has it doesn't take away the need for SIEM, but it just has different ways in which you partition your data, and you partition your data and you focus on that, or on three kind of main domains, right? The first is getting data in. That's always been one of the biggest challenges for any security operations team, is how do you get the data from its original destination to where you need it to be, right? And people are doing that in a variety of different ways, whether it's traditionally using something like a Splunk Heady Forwarder or an AWS Firehose, or even using one of the pipeline tools that have come to the market, right? Like likes of Gribble or Tenzir or actually, that's an exact example where there's about 5 or 6 others that are all exactly the same that are coming to the market with a lot of. Get ready for your inbox to blow up.
That's right.
But that's a really interesting space, because what that has enabled people to do is to ETL, to translate their data from point A to point B in a way that makes it easier and better to query. And that leads you on to the second piece, right? So if you're doing that, you've then got the ability to actually store your data in a completely different way, right? Whether you're looking at a data lake or you're looking at, whatever solution it might be for where you're going to store that data, you've then got your data in one simple place. Maybe you've got it in something like an OCSF format, right? That OCSF common schema that we're starting to see get huge traction in the market. And we think the community that's driving that is really enabling the normalization of vast amounts of data. That's a huge, huge thing. So let me call that number 2, right? Getting the data into the right place in a normalized format. What we're then seeing is people almost wanting to go seamless, right? I say almost because not everyone's ready for that. Not everyone's got the teams and the DevOps capability to do so. But we're starting to see some customers do some really cool things under the banner of sort of detection as code, right? So where you're writing Sigma rules with GitHub Actions, you're then using some kind of webhook into Jira for maybe some kind of automation or an automation action of some kind, right? We're starting to see customers, not just the really, really advanced customers, but actually customers across a huge number of different domains start to look at actually how do you do something like that. And then the last part, which we think is a bit of a game changer, is automation has always been a goal and an objective. And when in my time at Splunk, we talked to almost everybody about how Splunk SOAR could automate workflows and build things out. That's always been a really complex space, but frankly, some of the large language model variants of that have come out recently, the likes of like a Times or a Talk, have just changed the game so much. You go to either of those companies' websites; they're both pretty much do pretty much the same thing. You go to either of those websites and you look at some of the automation playbooks that people have literally dragged and dropped together, and you'll start to see that actually you don't have to be the genius coder to be able to do that anymore. That's become accessible to everybody. So that's what we're seeing, and I think that really ties to the tagline in our cast today, right, around SecDataOps.
Yeah,
because that's what that is. That is, and you can do that to any size and scale, to any organization. And what you're doing is much more taking control of your data in that journey, which I think is kind of cool.
So let me. I want to. You mentioned a hot button topic for me, which is SOAR.
Right.
Having attempted to deploy SOAR on a number of occasions. So SOAR for the audience who's listening, security automation and orchestration remediation, was supposed to be shine down from heavens the solution to solve all of our data challenges, if you will, in the early days of Splunk and SIEM in general. Why didn't SOAR work for us?
So, well, let me take a step back, right? If I give you my own personal experience of this journey with SOAR. So Splunk SOAR was originally a product from a company called Phantom, which got acquired by Splunk, and they wanted to use it to provide that and drive that automation. And in my part of the world, in Europe, there was a guy who's part of that business who came into Splunk, named Stefan, good friend of mine. He's done a load of work with me when I was setting my business up. And he was the de facto expert for all of EMEA or for all of the European customers that we'd go and talk to. And frankly, we didn't see any customers deploy it and make it work without help from him. So he was the bottleneck. Now, I'm not saying that he's a reason why it didn't work. What I'm saying is actually understanding fundamentally how SOAR works and how the automation part of that has to work has been historically very complex. And I've witnessed customers deploy SOAR in a way that has had some very, very serious side effects, right? That none of us intended. And those side effects could be, I'm not going to talk about it.
Okay. I was gonna ask. I was like, do you got some examples of those side effects that we could talk about?
Well, so I'm not going to, because I think that I can't do it in a way that is completely anonymized, right? But
sure.
But my point would be is that when you're trying to set up an automation playbook, what you're doing is you're going through a number of triggers and gates, right? So you're saying, if this happens, do this. If this happens, do this. If this happens, do this, right? And when you're coding all of that, it's complicated. And you're trying to think through a number of different things that are very, very difficult and very, very complex to do. Whereas, and this is why SOAR is now something that I think everybody should be thinking about, right? If you go and you look at some of those capabilities I mentioned, there's loads of them, and there will be loads more of them, but Times and Talk are two great ones to go look at because they do exactly what I'm about to talk about, which is you're able to visualize in a mind map that's those steps, which actually works a lot better for the human brain as well. And so that means that you can sit down and some of them you can go and take a look at some of them. I was shown one on the Times community page today by someone I was talking to, and it's this was for the IR team he was working with, and it was a really complex number of steps that went, the page went down and down and down, but you could still follow it, and you didn't need to be a SOAR expert to follow it. You just need to understand your own environment and what you're trying to do. So I would say that I would encourage anyone to go and have a look at some of the LLM type approaches that have been brought out within automation, because I think that's a game changer.
I can remember. So I remember Phantom before Splunk bought it. I was one of the early adopters after the acquisition of Phantom to try to get it to work for us. But I've also done Demisto and I've done Simplify, and those early days of SOAR very, very much were centered around, like, you needed to know Python. You practically had to be an expert in Python to make those automations work. And not only that, like, I think it's a combination of that developer experience to be able to write code in Python, but you have to think about an attack from start to finish. You have to think about all the possibilities, about an attack from start to finish. And that's not always something that I think most security orgs have down to an art or a science. And so inevitably, you've got analyst interaction that you have to do in the SOAR platform at some point in time, which just adds, again, to the bottleneck and doesn't actually facilitate the function of the automation. And I think the final thing that I saw that made SOAR challenging was nobody could actually ever get a real automation to take place. And I think this is where Torque and Tynes, to your point, have really excelled, is because they're more micro automations, right?
Correct.
Because we realized that we couldn't take a password reset from detection to response because some CEO was going to get really mad that their password was reset right in the middle of a meeting.
You're exactly on the money there. So I would definitely say that I think if we think about all of the challenges that security operations teams have, so much of that is fun. Yeah, you've got two things you've got to do. You've got to find the problem. You've got to fix the problem.
Yeah.
Right. So let's talk about the fix for a second. If the fix can be done for, if you can automate the boring stuff, right? If you can get the highly repeatable but relatively low value problem solved again and again and again using automation, just go do that. Just go do that. It's great for so many different reasons, and if it was only for the fact that it would help with the mental health and the longevity of people working in the security operations functions, well, then that's done its job, right?
Yeah,
that's done its job in one go. So yeah, big fan of automation. And I will say to you that 2 years ago, when I was working at Splunk, we had to try and encourage people to think about automation. Now, when I talk to customers, almost everybody has got some kind of idea about what they want to do with automation.
Yeah.
So I think that's going to be a big part of our industry.
All right, so I'm gonna pivot the switch on you here a little bit, right? Because we talked a little bit about some of the early challenges when it came to automation, the complexity in which it took to deploy it, maybe some of the challenges that you talked about, in terms of, like, it has some unintended consequences and some unintended side effects. What do you think AI's place is? We've bashed on AI a little bit here in terms of the marketing stuff and what shows up in my inbox, right? But what do you think of AI's place in the future of security operations teams, and specifically in kind of some of that same growing pains that we saw at SOAR? Do you see AI either following suit, helping out? Like, what do you see there?
So I don't know I've made up my mind yet, if I'm honest.
Okay.
I don't know I've made up my mind. I've seen some really cool things that some of the biggest vendors that in the industry, I don't need to name them, we all know who they are, who've built their co-pilot solutions. I think they've all got a long way to go, right? But I do think that is definitely a way that people are going to evolve. But wouldn't it be really cool if you could use AI to actually do some of the detection as code within your data lake type approach, right? If we're seeing people move very much more to putting their data in a centralized place and then distributing it to do things that they want to do. Being able to use an AI function and capability to run that detection within that space, that's really cool. That's something I think is so. Yeah, to answer the question, right? AI co-pilots, might well be a game changer. I don't know yet. I don't think they've been around long enough for us to really tell and test it. I think there's been some, I'm sure there's been some good examples, but I think where I see it working is maybe much more. And we're by the way, we're in my business, we're trying to work out what we think is right as well, by the way. So that this is very early thinking for us. This is not a defined kind of approach at all. But we do think that there is 100% a place for AI within that detection component of building out the a modernized SOC.
So I just, one of the places I spoke at last week was an AI and compliance conference, which doesn't sound exciting, but I mean, it was pretty interesting to see.
You should know the answer to that question that you just asked me there.
I do know the answer to it, but we're here to hear your opinion on it. But I do want to ask you, one of the things that did come out of that AI and compliance conference was really about data privacy and data security when it comes to models and stuff like that. As you think about not just your stance, but when you talk to clients and potential clients and things like that, and you have to coach them or counsel them on their stance, what's that balance between the potential efficiencies when we talk about burnout, we talk about getting to, defending the organization faster, processing those large numbers of data. What's that balance between data privacy and speed to answer in a security operations team that you think organizations need to be aware of?
So I think there's so what they need to be aware of. I think people are still working it out. I really do. And actually, the conference you were at last week, I'm sure that was one of the big questions. Like you say, it was the thing people are trying to work out.
Yeah,
I think there will always have to be a balance of when you think about privacy, you've got to comply. Right. So complying is not an option. Right. Yeah. So in terms of what you do with data, the types of data you see within wherever it might be within your organization, you have no option but to behave in the appropriate way. The flip side is you've got an active investigation against an active incident that is causing you a proper pain right now. You have to take intelligent, balanced decision making in a way that you're going to detect that as fast as possible and solve that problem as fast as possible. So I think I don't think there's a really, really well defined clear answer to that yet. But I think it's a really interesting, challenging space, right? A really interesting, challenging space that people are going to have to struggle with that's not going to go away anytime soon.
No, I don't think so. And I think to your point, like I just got done listening and talking with a bunch of folks on this last week, and the SEC, the security or the Securities Exchange Commission was there at the conference talking about this, and they were very much kind of along the same lines. Is like, hey, at the end of the day, you that are implementing the solution for AI, whether you're a technology vendor, you're a private industry that's using AI, you're ultimately responsible for the data issues that may arise from your use of that AI or that LLM or whatever the case is. And so you've got to take due care and due process, and I think you're right. I think when you hear that, you hear a very boilerplate text of people, saying you need to do stuff, but also kind of subliminally saying, we have no freaking clue what it is that we're doing in this space.
Yeah, I think that is, I think that's definitely the case. I mean, you look at the things we're discussing on this today, on in our discussion today about the SecDataOps story, right? That this journey is only just beginning for all of us, and we're all learning at the same time, and that means we're all making mistakes together as well. Right? but it's a really fascinating thing, and for me, one of the things that makes us useful is the fact that we're talking to a lot of different people with a lot of different opinions, and those opinions that are being collated right now are defining the way we solve those sorts of problems you just mentioned.
Absolutely,
because the answers aren't clear yet.
Absolutely. Let's move on to some answers that I think are starting to shape up in this space, right? So a little over a year ago, and I know this is a passion project for you. You're very into this, so I'm gonna kind of piggyback on some of that passion a little bit. But a little over a year ago, Amazon really surprised us with the release of AWS Security Lake. Now, big data in security, as you mentioned, is really nothing new. You think it's one of the key staples when you think about a security operations strategy. But oftentimes it's a give and take between software development overhead, build it yourself. You talked about a lot of security teams don't have that DevOps experience with which to do it. We've always had things like S3 and GCP and other cloud storage, but they've always been materially difficult for organizations to build upon and to implement. And so I really have to ask you, and it's also important to know, Security Lake isn't Amazon's first attempt at doing something security related in the SIEM space. They've had Detector or Detective for a while, which kind of acted as a pseudo SIEM for things like guard duty and whatnot. And so I want to ask you very pointedly and very specifically, since you do a lot of this, do you see Security Lake as an answer to a more mature product solution when it comes to SIEMs, cloud storage, and just security data lakes in general?
Yeah, I think so. When I say, it's a really, really complicated space, right? So the reason that we first started working with Amazon on this is because we were talking to lots of our Splunk customers, and I can give you a really good example, right? So I've got a Splunk customer of mine based in the UK, really mature user of Splunk, has quite a large data ingest today, but they were looking at what does 3 years ahead look like. And 3 years ahead for them looks like twice as much data as they have today, right? They did their predictions based upon their growth. And that was going to be a significant challenge for them for two main reasons. One, the vast amount of data they were going to have inside of Splunk, which was a concern for them because it was going to be more complex to query and potentially create more noise. And then the other problem was, frankly, was the price, right? And when you're looking at any SIEM provider that has a pricing model that is based upon ingest, and you double your amount of ingest, you're not going to quite double your cost, but you're going to get close to that. And that is a really, really big issue that we saw time and time again. So we actually started working with Amazon on the Security Lake before it was released. We were fortunate enough to be in the right place at the right time to have a little bit of influence, not necessarily around product strategy, but in the way that we were going to go to market with it. So we became pretty much the first people working on Lake kind of 18 months ago. And what that has done is it has freed up the way that people can look at how they want to operate their security function, right? And what I mean by that is that same customer of mine that I was talking about half of what they put into Splunk was CloudTrail, VPC flow logs. It was all the Amazon log sources that they had. And they were looking at how best to ingest those. And they were thinking about a streamer, and they were thinking about all sorts of other redacting kind of approaches. But actually, almost certainly for them, the very, very best thing for them to do was to leave that AWS data inside of AWS. And to find a way to partition the data effectively such that you're not sending it from point A to point B just so you can query it, right? And that, for us, was a bit of a game changer. The other thing that was a real game changer for us around any kind of data lake solution was how you're going to index and store the data, right? And we felt for a while that OCSF was going to be a really, really important approach for the whole community, right? Isn't it insane that you have to have a super smart searching capability to query data because it's in so many different formats? Why haven't we normalized data before today? It doesn't make any sense, right? So for us, the fact that that part of the story was about how do you normalize into a common schema, store all your data into one place, and then actually query that data or subscribe to that data from any of your security tooling, right? Doesn't need to be necessarily Splunk doesn't need to be for security use cases. You might want to store your data inside of it. Amazon have called it Amazon Security Lake. I do say to them a few times, I've said a few times that calling it a data lake might be more effective because then you're not alienating, your
IT ops and your observability
your
folks.
IT ops team, right?
Yeah.
But But ultimately, what it's done is it's given a lot of freedom to people to look at data differently.
Yeah.
And so we're starting to have conversations with customers and say, yeah, we'll say, what does your data look like today? We'll do a data source assessment and look at those sort of data sources that they're ingesting. But then we'll start to talk about the things they're not looking at today and why aren't you looking at them? And almost always the reason they're not looking at it is, well, either because it's going to confuse things or it's because it's expensive. But predominantly it's because it's expensive. So we've taken away that part of the problem, which then means actually if you've got all your data in one place, and we're seeing some customers ingest hundreds of terabytes of data per day, right? This is totally different to what, to the way this industry was ever intended to be with the SIEM model.
Yeah.
When you start to look at hundreds of terabytes or petabytes of data per day, because actually that's what you've got. Well, imagine the different use cases you could write or the threat detection strategies you could write that would go against that data set. So that's what it's doing. It's giving headroom for you to think about your data in a different way and your threat detection strategy in a completely different way.
I think that's awesome. And you when you say the words out loud, like I think I'm sure I've said them before and it just didn't resonate with me, but we're now talking in a day and age where we're talking about petabytes, right? Petabytes of data a day and then that's just like, if you think about Zoom, if you think about, a Nike, if you think about organizations like this, they're literally, contributing petabytes of data to their data team. And that data, only a fraction of that in a centralized SIEM marketplace is only able to be used for detections or response or threat hunting or things like that. But when you think about petabytes, it's weird to think that we've made it that far as an industry where petabytes is a thing now. And
it's going in one direction.
Yeah.
It's only going in one direction, right? I don't see that part of the challenge changing. So yeah, we've definitely seen that a data lake solution, doesn't matter which one you're looking at, data lake solutions provide a different way of operationalizing your security function and to detect threats in a completely different way.
So I'm going to challenge you. I'm going to challenge you pretty significantly, right? Because having built SIEMs, having built security operations teams before in the past, this all sounds like a fantastic utopia, right? Mm-hmm. But and for those, real quick before I get on this soapbox with Simon, for those, you heard Simon mention OCSF. OCSF is an open cybersecurity schema framework. It's completely open source. You can go out there and take a look at it. You can search OCSF and get access to it. There's a Discord where you can get access to it. Plus, we've had Jeremy Fisher, who's the CTO at Query, on the stream before. You can go to YouTube and view the video as Jeremy talks about OCSF and some of the advantages that OCSF has given to the community. But I want to. This all sounds great and all, and I've been part of these pipe dream visions before, but it's not without its challenges. And so I'm not going to let you come on here and talk about how awesome AWS Security Lake is and how awesome Security Lake technologies are and how they're revolutionizing and change the world without you talking about the problems. And so I'm going to force you on this stream to talk to me about the challenges that teams could have in terms of implementing those solutions.
Yeah. So that is not a problem, because I think, like you say, the way I was describing it did sound a little utopian, right? And I'm very conscious of that, because at a high level, actually, it is the right way to go, right? It is. I really do believe in it. Mm-hmm. The challenges are, I'll try and list them in order.
Yeah.
If you're an AWS customer and you choose the Amazon Security Lake, that's the one I know the best, right? So I can talk to those in order. You need to have the right, well-architected Amazon infrastructure to get the data into the lake in the right way to start with, right? If you haven't got organizations set up and you haven't got your cloud trail set up in the right way, it can either become expensive or messy. The second thing is, and actually that part, genuinely, I will hand on heart say that part is easy peasy, right? Getting your AWS log sources into the Amazon Security Lake is a radio button exercise if you have your organization set up correctly and you've got your Amazon infrastructure in a way that is going to support that. The part that's complicated is the fact that no one only has AWS log sources.
That's right. That's where
we get to the complication. So what, in the case of AWS and and again, I don't want to be on an AWS soapbox because that's not what this is about. This is just an experience basis. They have what they call source providers, and then they have subscribers to that data set. Everyone who is a source provider, and honestly, it's like it's a who's who list of all the security vendors that most people use. They have all created an OCSF conversion capability to put the data into the lake. The problem you have is that OCSF has had 3 or 4 different standards this year already, and the input changes all the time as well. So this comes back to the biggest challenge for anybody adopting a security lake solution is how do you get data in, right? And there's 2 parts to getting data in. There's the pipelining of it and the ingesting of it into the lake. But the second part, which actually also, by the way, I'm quite certain there's been a massive update in the OCSF forum recently with a number of these conversions. Because the second part is how do you convert that data? How do you translate that data into OCSF format? Because if you don't land it in OCSF format into the lake, you're just going to get an error, right? You can still send it there, but it will not work. The glue, the crawler, it will not do its thing. So that is the challenge, number one, right? And that is not a small challenge for anybody.
Let me also piggyback on that as well. I have tried, like, I'm not going to rat out the technology, but a very well-known technology that is out there talks about how they're one of the very first adopters of Security Lake. I'm a Security Lake user at Query, and they have got this awesome GitHub that they talk about having this great, fantastic tool that they use to move data into Security Lake that absolutely does not work whatsoever. And so, it's very much like you said. There's getting the data out of those technologies and into the lake is a massive challenge for organizations these days.
It is. So that's something that I think is going to get easier with time, right? And I think that's going to get easier with time because it's breaking new ground, right? There's no one has created that repository of fantastic conversions yet. Although actually, I think the community is starting to drive in that direction. So that's the first thing. I think the next thing that is the challenge is how you're actually going to query the lake, right? And what is your strategy for that? Now that falls into Query's wheelhouse very, very firmly, but also you have Athena. You can write a number of different ways to query data in the lake, but the Amazon Security Lake or none of these data lakes are a SIEM. They're not a replacement for your SIEM. They haven't got pre-built use cases. They're not doing active threat detection for you. You have to do it yourself, right? One way or another, you have to do that detecting. You have to do that threat detection yourself. Do not expect that you deploy a security data lake and then everything is solved, right? That's not what it's all about, right? It's about centralizing your data in a common schema to make it easier to query. If you do that, what you've done is you've given yourself kind of data independence. That's the way I view it. And you can choose any way that you want to work with that data. But that's the big thing, Neal. It really is the big thing.
I think that last point, when I think about my role as CISO, when I look back on my career and I think about the security teams that I've built in the past, what you just described there, I think is the thing that gets me excited about the future of security operations, is because for the longest time, believe it or not, we really didn't have a choice. We had an illusion of choice in the marketplace. You could choose one SIEM vendor over another. You could choose to build it yourself versus taking an off-the-shelf solution. And I think that innovation has really led itself to truly now having more of a choice in that architecture. And I think that that's the thing that I'm super excited about. Simon, before I let you go, we've got 2 questions that have kind of come in that I think are really, really, I think you're in the best position to answer for the community. And I think the first one really kind of goes back to some of your recommendations on SIEM platforms and talks about scoping what types of logs to send to a SIEM platform. Would this be a shared responsibility between customer and security service provider?
Definitely. I think there's, the exercise that we used to run all the time with our customers was called a data source assessment, a Splunk DSA. That you really need to run that in parallel together because the provider who's working with you will know your data better than your provider does, but your provider will know what everyone else is doing with those types of data, and they will have advice for you about use cases that you can build with that data. So you kind of have two ways in which you do the data ingest review. Either you start with what am I worried about first? What are my use cases? Or you start with where's my data? But whichever way you do that, I would definitely recommend working with whoever you're interested in working with, whichever SIEM provider you want to work with. Let them help you a little bit in defining those use cases.
What I can say is, like, as I hear you talk about this process, I'll tell you from like the customer side of this. I remember going through Splunk when I was doing Splunk deployments, had a PVP, a prescriptive value plan. Yeah. And it was very much that, where it talks about like, okay, here are typical cybersecurity use cases, here are typical fraud use cases, threat hunting use cases, and things like this. And then let's look at the data sources that were, that you were choosing to put into the SIEM and whatnot. I think this is where, kind of tying it back into your last point about choice of architecture and design, this is where I think the SIEM space is really gonna start to have to make some decisions, because in the days that we were doing this, you had to make a choice. Like, you only have so much money, you only have so much ingest, you only have so much capability that you could put into that SIEM without seeing your bill skyrocket. And so that exercise that Simon's talking about, absolutely crucial. Like, I totally agree with Simon on this. I think it is. But I think if you're a budget holder, or if you're a strategic planner, or if you're trying to do this for the first time, you will quickly realize the lack of choice that you have if you're solely focused on just a SIEM to answer the mail for that.
Yeah, definitely. The other thing I would say is, don't be afraid of challenging your provider on removing some data sources, right? If you've already got a SIEM in place, and you're doing a review with your provider that's looking at all the data sources and the use cases, start to think about, do I really need that data source to drive that use case? Because I'll tell you, you won't find many SIEM providers who'll recommend you remove data sources from their system, right? And so you might find that working with an independent provider might give you a better balance on that. That's something we've done. You can't always remove data sources, but just don't forget, there's an option, right? Just because you needed that data source 5 years ago for that use case doesn't mean you need it now, and you'll still be paying for it.
That's a very, very valid point. Like, I almost think of it like, you've got to maintain these systems. You've got to like continuously evaluate those data sources, make sure they're still relevant.
100%.
All right, last question for you, Simon, before I let you go and I continue on with my audience. Net Frazier says, what's your take on how the industry is either doing good or bad about securing data APIs?
About securing data APIs. Do you know what, Neal? I'm not sure I've got a good answer for you on that one, and I do apologize for that. But I'm not here to BS an answer where I don't feel like I've really got a good take on it. So I'm going to throw it to you, because I'm certain that you do have a good answer for that one.
I've got an answer. I think my audience would argue with you whether it's a good answer or a bad answer, and I'm actually really quite okay with that. Right? I think the industry does a bad job, quite honestly, of securing data APIs. And I blame engineers, right? I say that tongue in cheek. I love every single one of the engineers that we have at Query, but I blame businesses mostly, right? There's such a rush to get solutions to market that security inevitably becomes the least important thing in most cases getting out there. And so APIs are oftentimes forgotten about. They're oftentimes put in place as a way to make the DevOps process easier. And so as a result, they're rarely secured the way that they need to be. I think that they are the new attack surface footprint in most organizations these days. So I still think we're doing bad on. I think that's one I'd give a huge giant thumbs down on in terms of industry capabilities.
That sounds like a very fair summary.
Awesome. Yeah. Simon,
cool.
On behalf of the entire cyber insecurity and SecDataOps community, I absolutely, utterly appreciate you taking the time out of your afternoon and in our morning to come and chat with us across the globe. I'm going to stick around and talk to my audience, but the floor is yours. If you'd like to say anything to the audience before I send you back over to the green room and along your day.
Yeah, well, so firstly, thanks so much for joining it. So thanks so much for inviting me to join you today. I mean, it's been really interesting. I had a great time with you here. What I would say to your audience is we're trying to post and share these insights as we come across them on a regular basis. So if you'd like to, feel free to follow my company, Hoop Cyber, on LinkedIn, or myself personally. If you have any questions for me, feel free to reach out to me. Probably that's the easiest way to do so, or via Neal's community here. But no, thanks so much for listening, and I hope some of it was useful.
If anybody needs to, you can hit !guest in Twitch chat. We'll make sure the links get posted across to the other social media platforms as well. But you can hit !guest in chat and get access to Simon's LinkedIn page. Simon, stay awesome, sir, and we will chat with you next time. Oh, what a Friday it's been. Honestly, I'm not even going to bother changing my background from the SecDataOps one to cyber and security, so we'll just leave this one up for the duration of the stream. But yeah, thank you all for tuning in so much for an off-schedule early morning dual stream between SecDataOps and Tea with a Hacker. Simon's an amazing wealth of resource. It's awesome. Like I was talking with so I spent the last 3 weeks traveling. We'll talk about that here in a little bit. I was last week at the AI and compliance conference, and I was talking with some peers of mine, and we all talk about that entrepreneurial desire to, I want to kind of say like effectively leave cybersecurity, if you will, in terms of like leaving the private sector behind or not leaving the private sector, but leaving a large corporation and just kind of starting our own business. That is not uncommon. We come to find, and it's not, I wouldn't call it a drive to, for anything other than, and I've had this drive myself, right? There's only so much you can do for one company, right? Whether you're a pen tester, whether you're a blue teamer, whether you're a security architect, security engineer, GRC person, there's only so much you can do for one company. And so a lot of us feel this drive and this pull to venture out on our own, if you will, so that we can basically help more companies, if you will. And I think that's, at least I know that the folks that I talk to, that's a lot of our drive for kind of going out, and starting our own consulting companies, putting ourselves out there to help organizations is, if I can help somebody here do this, if I can help somebody here with a strategy, maybe their first SOC 2, maybe building a security operations team from scratch, maybe it's doing their first threat hunt or their first pen test. Those are all individual challenges that you get to help 4 or 5 or 6 or 10 companies. And when I think about just the number of challenges that organizations have to deal with on a day-to-day basis, there's no shortage of that. And so as a result, we find ourselves wanting to do more to help, and entrepreneurship and starting our own company is oftentimes the way to do it. Unfortunately. It's not for everybody, and I applaud Simon for being able to spend the years that he did in the industry and to go out there and start his own company. It's very challenging. It's very challenging to kind of put yourself out there as being, somebody who can solve big company challenges, and not for the faint of heart, but highly recommend it. So, thanks for Simon for coming and hanging out with us. Thank you all so much for tuning in this morning. As we transition over to our normal Friday AMA, catch you up, right? Because it's been a few weeks since we chatted, and I appreciate everybody's messages to me, the DMs on LinkedIn and Instagram and whatnot. It's truly been a nice to have. I've been traveling for the last 3 weeks. I spent 3 weeks ago, I was in Southern California. I did a two event speaking engagement in Southern California, one in San Diego and one in Irvine, California, south of Los Angeles, basically. And then I was in Seattle, for a little while. And then last week I was at it was actually this week. God, it's this week. I was at the AI and compliance conference speaking with, if you remember Richa, who was on the stream a couple of maybe a month-ish or so ago. Richa had asked me to come and speak from a CISO's perspective at the AI and compliance conference, and so that was pretty exciting. So I've got a lot of learnings from being out there. From speaking at these conferences. I talked to a lot of security practitioners. I talked to a lot of CISOs. happy to share all that knowledge with you, obviously, as it's never short of inciting. I'll kind of talk about San Diego for a second. I had spoken on kind of the evolution of data centralization and security operations with the Cloud Security Alliance and the OWASP group out there in Southern California, 2 different occasions. It was awesome to talk to security practitioners and CISOs and see that everybody else is agreeing that we have a security data problem, right? The old way of doing, like when you, I think as a presenter, right? When I talk about presenting at conferences, for those who don't know, let's talk a little bit about giving presentations. Maybe you're trying to give your first presentation. Maybe you're thinking about giving your first presentation. Maybe you're thinking about what it would be like to give a presentation. Let me kind of talk to you a little bit about that, like walking on stage, looking at a room full of people and giving that talk, right? You never know. You never know about your talk. I don't care how confident anybody appears to be on stage. You are never confident about your talk. But yet the audience is immediately going to pick up on your mannerisms. And so you have to present yourself in the most confident fashion. And one of the things that I do when I'm presenting is I look at audiences' reactions when I say certain things in my presentation. And that's kind of a checkpoint for me as a speaker. That's kind of a checkpoint for me where I look at that and I say, like, okay, is this topic resonating with folks? Is this topic something that people are genuinely interested in? And am I hitting the pain points that are going to resonate with my audience? And I was 2 slides in talking about the failures of a modern security stack, and every security operator in that room, heads were nodding up and down. I had one analyst that was sitting in the front row who had this like, yep, that's my day on a day-to-day basis. And it was relieving, obviously, as a speaker to be able to see that, but at the same time, it was disheartening to see the front line, because you know me, like I've always talked about SOC analysts and incident responders being the frontline foot soldiers in most organizations, and defending the enterprise on a day-to-day basis, and to see the stress and the strain and the angst in those folks' eyes, knowing that their life is getting harder and harder and harder to defend an organization, was also heartbreaking at the same time. And so I say all that to say, I continue to show my empathy for those on the blue team side. For I'm sure most of you are here because you see that I'm a former NSA hacker, and you love to, you've got these fantasies about being, the Mr. Robot or the whatever of the hacking world and things like this. The true unspoken heroes and soldiers, without a doubt, of cybersecurity, day in and day out, without a doubt, are the blue teamers who are on the front lines. And so from the bottom of my heart, as I gave that talk in San Diego at both those locations, as I talked to, folks who are on the front lines on a day-to-day basis, I constantly send my thanks and appreciation for all that it is that you guys do on the front lines of cybersecurity. The industry will continue to change, hopefully we'll move into a better direction. Hopefully we'll see how it goes. I don't know. We'll see. I love San Diego when I was at Camp Pendleton. Absolutely. I'd say that just believing what you're talking about, not sounding like you're unsure about the topic. Absolutely. Like that confidence that you talk about, Nathan, like when you speak, like I think this is the hardest thing to convince new speakers to do, right? When I coach folks, and I coach folks on what it is like to give their first presentation, if you will, the nervousness comes because you're worried that somebody in the audience is smarter than you and they're going to think you're an idiot, right? And I can unequivocally tell you that that will never go away. I can tell you that I've spoken at hundreds of events. I've spoken in front of crowds of hundreds, and it will never go away, that imposter syndrome or that intimidation about the audience. And what I've told people is, you're there as a reflection of your expertise to yourself, right? You have a conviction to yourself about what you believe in. You have a conviction to yourself about the concepts that you're speaking of, and you are your hero. You are your subject matter expert. You are the only one who has walked through your learning journey. I'll give you an example, right? You should go out there and give a talk on Nmap. God, Neal, why would I give a talk on Nmap? Everybody and their brother's done a video, a podcast, 4,000 write-ups. There's 100 tutorials on Nmap. You're right. But you know what nobody has done? Nobody has walked down your path of learning Nmap. Right? Nobody has learned it the way that you learned it. Nobody has had the challenges that you're having about it. Right? And so I encourage you to be your own foremost expert, if you will, when it comes to speaking, and have that confidence, excuse me, when you're up there, that you went through those trials and tribulations and that you are the expert on the challenges that you solved to get to that conclusion. Sorry, checking out YouTube. Good morning. A couple of questions come in. Love this. Like, God, I'm changing gears mentally. Going from SecDataOps to Tea with a Hacker is proving slightly harder this morning than I thought. Ricochet Tech over in Twitch chat. Thank you so much for being a subscriber, Ricochet Tech. Question, Neal, speaking of monitoring issues or not, and generally about cyber events, the recent new re-ISP telco hacks, what are your thoughts overall? I watched a Wall Street Journal YouTube video discussing the story. They mentioned edge devices. Oh, I saw your comment in in Discord this morning. They mentioned edge devices, routers were modified to route traffic in a particular way, etc. Really concerning that critical infrastructure affecting us all is so legacy, unmonitored, weak enough for long-standing attacks. Yes. So there's a couple things to talk about here, Ricochet Tech, when it comes to comes to what you're asking there. Critical infrastructure is effed. There's no easy way to put it. There is no easy way to put it. I can tell you from my days in the service, serving our country, what I've seen post. We've had Rob Lee on the stream from Dragos talk about it before in the past, talking to peers in the industry, working in manufacturing. The problem truly is a money issue. And I don't mean that from, there isn't motivation to fix the problem. God, that sounds really horrible to say out loud, but that's the first word that kind of comes to mind when I think about it, right? So let's break down critical infrastructure in a couple of different ways. I think the first and foremost problem with critical infrastructure is that it is a for-profit industry. It is a for-profit industry. And so because it is a for-profit industry, just like when we were talking with Simon, and we talk about having to make a business decision about what data you put into for detections, critical infrastructure vendors have to make a decision about where they invest their money. And quite honestly, security is not the first and foremost thing that they choose to invest their money on. What's even worse let's take the root DNS servers. The DNS servers, the 13 DNS servers that run every piece of DNS infrastructure in the entire world are predominantly run by nonprofits. So that's like a step below the for-profit industry, meaning that they rely on donations, they rely on 501c charity organizations, they rely on the scraps that come together from a model that doesn't prioritize profits. And so if you think that a for-profit industry is going to struggle with cybersecurity, a nonprofit industry is going to practically ignore cybersecurity altogether. That alone should scare you. Right? And quite honestly, we don't need to have the root DNS providers to be monetarily incentivized. Could you imagine how your DNS traffic would flow differently if somebody could pay to have their websites answer first over somebody else's? Think about that for a second. Right? And so when you think about things from a monetary perspective, there is not a fiscal incentive to do the right thing when it comes to security. And I'll give you an example. I spent a lot of time working in the energy sector, power plants, energy companies, power grid, organizations like that. They have really good lawyers. They have really good lawyers, right? Because you can imagine if your power goes out, sympathies go out for everybody who's been affected by the recent hurricanes here lately, right? But at the same time, if you're sitting around watching, Family Guy at night and your power goes out for 24 hours, there's somebody out there who's going to decide that they want to go sue the power company. Like, I lost, $200 of food in the fridge. I lost so many hours of productivity at work. Therefore, I'm going to sue the power company for lost time based on a power outage, right? And so they've got very good lawyers. I say all that to say, if the government comes down and says, thou shalt have a minimum baseline of security, that organization, that power company is going to turn right around to the government and say, cool, give me some money so that I can do the things that you're telling me I now have to do as a business. And the cycle continues. And this is fundamentally what the challenge is when it comes to critical infrastructure in our space. Businesses aren't incentivized to do it. They're still for-profit industries. Much of the infrastructure that we run on these days is not for profit. If you think about a lot of the baseline TCP, IP, RFC type of stuff that the entire fundamentals of the internet are on, it's truly that meme where you've got some guy in a basement who wrote a protocol or wrote a solution, put it up on GitHub or some other type of code repository back in the day. The entire internet started to download it and use it, and you got this one guy who's now moved on to doing some other type of thing in his entire life, and you've got to rely on the populace to update it, maintain it, and make sure it's secure. Right? This is what happens when you prioritize certain things over cybersecurity. And so Ricochet Tech is a long-winded way of saying it shouldn't surprise you. It doesn't surprise me. When you ask me what my thoughts are overall, it doesn't surprise me because we have misplaced priorities when it comes to critical infrastructure. We have misplaced priorities. We've not discussed the Internet Archive yet, David. I mean, again, this gets back to what I'm speaking before, right? Like, honestly, like, and again, like, who cares? Like, good job. Like most hackers hack things for clout. Let's be 100% honest with you, right? Whether we talk about clout, whether we talk about ransomware for monetization, whatever the case is, blah 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 blah. Whoever decided that they were going to hack the Internet Archive, the Wayback Machine, that's like going and kicking the walker out from underneath the grandmother or the grandfather that's just trying to get to the coffee shop. Like good job. Like, what do you want? What clout are you looking for by taking down the Internet Archive? You're so elite. A nonprofit entity that's truly just trying to preserve the growth and the history of this thing that we've all come to know and love and abuse in some cases over the years, doing it, again, as a nonprofit. What did you think they were going to have the latest and greatest security infrastructure in place? Did you think, really, that they would have a team of 4,000 SOC analysts watching alerts on a day-to-day basis? Like, come on. Think about it. Be realistic for a second. So you hacked the Internet Archive. Now there's people DDoSing the Internet Archive. Good job. You're elite. Super proud of you. Right? I think that's the problem that I have, right? Is that like that's my thoughts on it. Like, what else is there to discuss? What else? Like, seriously, like what do you want to discuss? Oh my God, I can't believe it. The world is coming to an end. The Internet Archive has been hacked. It's a library. You went to the library and you abused the library. Hacking, like, oh God, don't get me started. Oh God, there might be a soapbox on this. Hacking used to mean something. Hacking used to mean something. Even in today's like ransomware-ridden world, I'm willing to accept the role of cyber criminals and what it is that we do. Right? I'm willing to accept that, right? Because hacking has always had its shadier side of things. Right? I'm absolutely willing to accept living in an internet world where cybercrime is there. But even criminals in some ways have a sort of boundary. We saw this during the bouts of COVID, right? There were lots of ransomware groups who came out with a statement where they were like, we will not hack hospitals. And there was actually a couple of hospitals that did get ransomwared in the middle of COVID, and those ransomware groups went out of their way to try to unscrew up that issue. Right? And so there is, I still believe in honor amongst thieves in some of these cases. Right? And that's why I get very soapboxy about the Internet Archive, because listen, I can't say that live on stream. This will be one of the times where I will censor myself a little bit on this one. Security guru guys over there like, get him, Neal. Yeah, we've lost some of that. And there was somebody, push that comment up. Maybe they have something archived on there that don't want to be seen. Okay. Maybe they do. Who cares? Right? Do you think that nobody, there are people who scrape the Internet Archive on the daily looking for exactly what it is you're talking about, right? It's not some hidden treasure that like now that it's out there, people are like, oh my God, what was on there? Like conspiracy theorists, like, and again, I want you to understand something. Before I went into the Air Force, I was a massive conspiracy theorist. I understand the mentality, right? I really do. But what I have learned over my years on this planet, having been exposed to government for 10 of those years, right? Conspiracy theories are rarely true. Like 99.99% of your conspiracy theories, if you think about it, it's rarely true. And I'll die on that sword. Like, I'll absolutely die on that sword. I think there's a difference between a conspiracy theory, right? I think there's a difference between a conspiracy theory and just government ignorance, right? I definitely am not a believer in most of the conspiracy theories, and this is one of them. I don't think there is, and I think you underestimate the internet sleuths that are out there, that if there was something out there on the Internet Archive that people didn't want to be seen, it was probably already discovered. I have no idea who did it. I have no idea who did it. I don't care who did it. It doesn't matter to me at the end of the day who did it. It shouldn't matter to you either. Who cares? I don't know why, and I actually don't care why. Happy Friday, Neal. Hope you're well, brother. Thanks for everything you do. Appreciate you, sir. I appreciate you. I appreciate everybody who tunes in here and listens to me yap. This is interesting, security guru guy. This isn't the first time I've heard this. So I mentioned I was in San Diego a couple weeks ago. And I was talking with Rick McElroy. We've had Rick on the stream several times. Rick is a huge, advocate for the stream. He loves the community. He loves showing up. He misses you guys. And Rick and I were chatting, and Rick is former Marines, if you don't remember. Did a lot of cyber, and intel for Marines. He was telling me that they actually asked him to come back for Mars Cyber. He's been out for years. And they actually said that there is now a Marine program for former Marines that they can come back into cyber. And I thought that was interesting as hell. And that kind of speaks to what Security Guru guy's saying over here on YouTube, right? For FYI, for anyone who worries about their local utilities or government, you can volunteer for the Cyber Reserve. Many states have them, and it's completely voluntary. If your state or nation, if you're listening to me overseas, has a volunteer cyber reserve, you should absolutely volunteer for that. As a matter of fact, I think that is definitely one of those, volunteer, extracurricular, type of things that everybody should do. And I think that it's awesome that we're seeing. So I've if you've watched this stream, if you've been around for a number of years, I talk about how nation states like China and Russia make heavy use of civilian cyber forces to help protect their organizations. And I've oftentimes criticized the United States for not having that same type of capability. And so when I start hearing about the Marines, potentially having a program where they bring folks back in, I hear about these local municipality cyber reserves to help protect organizations. I see it as a step in that direction, and it's the right step in that direction. I do think that this is cool. This is awesome. And everybody who hears my voice now or in a VOD, or Jens, if you're around, clip this, should be looking out for a volunteer cyber reserve with which they can go participate in. Now, let's put a disclaimer on there. If you think you're going to be some vigilante mercenary hacker on behalf of your local municipality water treatment facility plan, you've got the wrong idea. We are not only not there yet, but I don't see us ever being there in any time in the future. But that is not what we need in a reserve cyber force. We need people out there who are helping do baseline fundamental cybersecurity things in these municipalities, right? That enterprises do. We need people who can help protect, to your point, Ricochet Tech, critical infrastructure, because from a monetary perspective, they don't have the resources to do so. And so, no, you're not going to come be some vigilante hacker for, your local municipality by going to volunteer for this. But what you could do is even better, and you could go make a difference in protecting an organization. Chubby Cannon says, does joining reserves have the same requirement as regular? I'm in Canada. I don't know. I don't know how that works for Canada. If anybody's got any, information on that, feel free to drop it into chat. Can you elaborate more on the Marine cyber? I'll do my best, but I'm getting this from Rick. And so if you've seen Rick on our stream before, I would encourage you to reach out to Rick. He's he's the one who told me this, and you can tell him that you heard about it from our stream. The fact that he mentioned it while we were at dinner, you can tell him all of that and ask him for details. But from the way that he described it to me was that they were offering special incentives for Marines who had already gotten out of the service who wanted to come back in and do careers in cyber. And so they were basically looking for people to bolster specifically their cyber forces inside of the Marines. Now, I'm Air Force, I'm not Marine, so I have no idea what that looks like when you get to the inside of that. As a matter of fact, I wouldn't even know what it looked like for the Air Force side of it because it wasn't something that we were considering when I was in the service. I would have my own set of questions that I would want to for that. But if it does sound like an initiative that you're interested in, I would definitely, like I said, reach out to Rick. Ask him where he heard about it, if he can give some more details on it. Maybe go down to your local recruiting station. Try not to get sucked into a normal recruiting speech from the Marines or anything like that, and see if they've got any information on the program. And as far as like other, only see Ohio Cyber Reserve, any other states. Good question. Not 100% sure. This is a DYOR thing. Go check that out. There's a lot of interest in this. Can anyone join a cyber reserve, or do you have to be prior service? Good question. Not 100% sure. That's a fantastic question. These are all, I literally just found out about this 3 weeks ago, and I've been on the road for 3 weeks, so I haven't done a whole lot of research on this. Happy to do a follow-up. I'll actually make a note of myself, and I'll do some, this sounds like everybody is super, super interested in this. I will, Jens, if you're listening, can you make a note for us to take this entire topic and let's do some research. Let's see if we can find a guest that can come on stream. If anybody has a guest, please point them to me on LinkedIn. If you're hearing me, if this sounds like everybody's super, super interested in this, I will absolutely make an effort to see if I can't find a guest that'll be on stream for this. But please work with me if you know somebody, and I'll be more than happy to try to find us a guest on this. It sounds like there's a lot more interest in this than I realized. I love it. Like I said, I've always preached that I think it's a good thing. We need to move in this direction. We absolutely need to move in this direction. This is a long time coming. I will make it a point to find us a guest to talk about. Sebastian over on YouTube, what's wrong with coding in the basement? Absolutely nothing coding in the basement. Sebastian also follows a first-time listener. Dude, love this stream. Thanks so much. Love you guys. Always enjoy chatting. And again, thank you all for tuning in for this morning. I realize it's been 3 weeks since we streamed. I've been on the road for 3 weeks. It's good to be back. It's good to be back on camera and back streaming. I love talking in person. Let me remind everybody, let me remind everybody, pay attention to my social medias. Hit exclamation point socials in chat, right? Make sure you're following the social media stuff. Make sure you're in Discord. Hit exclamation point Discord to be in Discord. I oftentimes post where I'm going to be. And this is like, the reason this is important, I give free mentoring, free coaching at any point in time if you catch me in one of your cities, states, municipalities, countries, whatever the case is. Right? I absolutely block off time on my calendar to sit with anybody. It's completely for free. Completely for free. If I'm traveling to you, it's completely for free. Bonus points if you take me out on the golf course and play some golf with me. Absolutely bonus points if you take me on the golf course and play some golf with me. But this is why I encourage you to make sure you're following me on social media. Make sure you've got those notifications turned on. Make sure you interact with my content, because I'm going to have some more travel coming up. I'm going to Austin. I'm going to Phoenix. I'm going back to DC. I got asked to keynote coming out of the conference this week. They asked me to come and keynote in February in DC. So obviously travel is going to start to pick up for me. I'll tell you right now, the team is trying to figure out a way for us to stream on the road. You know that we've tried this before in the past. The setup that we had didn't really work very well. And so we're working through some ways to stream on the road so that we can continue to do this and not have to go a couple weeks without streaming. So all of that is in the works. I want to give a huge thanks to Jens, to Maz, my entire mod team as they continue to help us keep this place awesome. Frazier, which you saw in chat, is there. So make sure you hit me up if I'm in your town. And listen, this is an AMA, and when I say AMA, it's literally ask me anything. This being a perfect case. What's your handicap? My handicap is currently an 8.9. 8.9. I play at a 12. What's the difference between those two? I use 18 birdies on my phone to track all my rounds. Across all of my rounds, which includes various tee positions, various number of holes, things like that, I'm an 8.9. I use the official USGA GHIN app to track my tournaments. My GHIN from USGA is a 12.3. So I play at a 12.3, and I come to find out, I didn't realize this until my coach told me this. This shows you just how new to golf I am. Apparently, the USGA counts my tournament rounds in a more scrutinous fashion than my practice rounds count, which is why my handicap is higher on the USGA app than it is on my 18 Birdies app because of how the USGA, the US Golf Association, records handicaps. I'm actually okay with that. I don't mind playing at a 12. And continuing to practice and drive my handicap down. I don't care if you think that it's going to slow me down. I'm out there for the love of the game, and I just love to hang out with you, give you some free advice for 4.5 hours on a golf course. C-Ram says I'm a range rat. That's okay. I'll be on the... listen, ask Frazier. Frazier got a free mentoring session at Top Golf. We just hung out at Top Golf the entire time. I hit golf balls at Top Golf, and we did a mentoring session at Top Golf. I'm not a Top Golf snob where we can't go to Top Golf. I'll absolutely do a range rat session with you at Top Golf. Absolutely. Next time in Florida, I'll actually probably be in Florida in January. I'm playing in a new league. The new league that I'm playing in is the APT, the Amateur Players Tour. First time I'm branching out of something, pseudo niche like the VGA, and I'm actually going to play in a, an amateur dedicated event, amateur dedicated tour. And so in January is the Florida season opener in Orlando. So around the January time period, I have to check the schedule. Around the January time period, I'll actually be in Orlando playing there for the regional opener. So yeah, I'll talk about anything. I'll talk about absolutely anything, including this general inquiry. Any thoughts on cybersecurity based stocks? Absolutely. So if you're not, listen, on this topic, everybody should be invested in stocks. Like, I don't care what your financial status is. I don't care whether you're a student or a vet. I don't care whether you got golden handcuffs or $5 in your bank account. Everybody should be invested in stocks. I'm not saying don't, everybody should do their own research. Like, this is not financial advice. I'm not a CFA or an IRA or an IPJ or a CPW or whatever the freaking acronym is for it. I'm not any of those things. It's not financial advice. I just think that as a professional, as somebody who's vested in your future, you should be invested in stocks. What do I think about cybersecurity stocks? I think that we've seen I think fundamentally, and this is Neal's personal opinion, this is not financial advice. I'll make sure the FCC or whoever hears me, say this, that this is not financial advice. I fundamentally believe that we're in a buy period here in the market, right? I think now is the best time to buy. Like, even though we've seen a lot of ups and downs, I think now is the best time to buy. I think any time is actually really the best time to buy. Do your own research. I think that there are some winners and there are some losers. I'll give you an example. I bought into Snowflake probably 6 months ago. Snowflake has not done really, really well. I do still think that Snowflake has an interesting offering. I'm interested to see it, do well. Palo Alto, I bought into Palo Alto. I thought Palo Alto would do good. Palo Alto has not done very, very well. The status of the stock is not necessarily indicative of my feeling on the company. I think Palo Alto has been an interesting platform holder for a really, really long time. And I just think that we're in a fundamentally different place than we were during some of the bear market. But I do think that everybody should be invested in stocks no matter where you sit on that spectrum. Talking about critical infrastructure, the lack of security funding, would you recommend breaking into OT, ICS, cybersecurity side? Absolutely. Like, we need more people doing that, not less. And I think that's one of the key problems is that we don't have enough people who are focused in on that. So I absolutely think there should be more people doing that. Please go do it. We need more. What's a good first penetration testing certification? The one where you learn something. God, Neal, why you got to be so cynical about certs? You guys know why I'm cynical about certs. It's no secret. I make my opinion very, very clear about why I'm cynical on certs. The first best thing you can do is learn something. Duh, Neal, that's why I'm taking the cert. Not necessarily. Not necessarily. Not if you don't understand how psychology works. Has Neal lost his mind? Did Neal have too much caffeine? Hello? Too much caffeine in the cup. The goal of certification companies is to separate you from your money. Hands down, it's not to educate you. If that is not obvious to you, let's take a moment of silence for you to catch your breath. The goal of certification companies, the goal of anybody who puts out course content and charges you for it, is to separate you from your money. Why? Because there's nothing magical that they can tell you about anything inside of Kali Linux that isn't available for free on YouTube. I'll die on that sword. There's nothing secret. There's nothing hiding in the code. There's nothing that they possess some special skill that begets that you have to pay them for it. Period, dot, end of discussion. You should only separate yourself from your money in cases where you're truly going to get bespoke knowledge that you can't get anywhere else. Hell, even my opinion I give away to you for free here on this stream every single time you tune in. Greg over on LinkedIn, facts, he was not short of dropping that one. Because the goal of security company, or because the goal of certification companies are to separate you from your money, there isn't a best. And to tell you what was best would be a disservice. Right? Because that would mean that I would be endorsing that somebody had some level of bespoke knowledge that would drastically transform your career. And that is myth number 2 about the certification industry. No certification, zero certification. Zero certification will guarantee you a job, especially in today's job market. Period, dot, end of discussion. And because of that, anybody who says otherwise is using sleazy marketing tactics to separate you from your money. Which is why when you come to this stream, my answer to this question will always and forever be, don't chase certs, chase knowledge. And the best anything is where you learn something for the least amount of personal financial investment. And if anybody ever tells you, hey, this thing that I did was really, really cool. If you want to see more of it, go pay for my course over here. Just trying to separate you from your money. I'll give you an example. And I'll use myself as an example. I stream here as much as I humanly possibly can. I'd stream every day of the week if I could make my schedule line up to it. I promise you that. And every day that I stream, whether I'm streaming cybersecurity content, whether we're doing Tea with a Hacker, whether I've got a guest on, whether we're doing SecDataOps, whether I'm having a cyber insecurity game night, whatever the case is, whatever I'm streaming, you can always come here and you can always ask questions, and chances are I'll always answer. You want resume advice? Absolutely. I'll give you tons of resume advice right here, right now, live on this stream. You know what you can also do? You can also go see the hours of free resume content that I have on the YouTube channel that literally walks you through step by step changes you can make to your resume and your LinkedIn to be the most successful. You can go to the cyberinsecurity.tv website and you can see and access a free resume and LinkedIn rubric so you can self-assess your resume and your LinkedIn based on all the videos that I put out there. Furthermore, you can go to the Cyber Insecurity Discord and leverage the entire community to get you feedback on your resume. And if all of that free stuff, you decide at the end of the day that you want some bespoke knowledge that I have inside of my head that for some reason hasn't been given away completely and totally for free, after you do all of that free stuff, or you just want to spend some one-on-one time with me asking some very specific questions about your very specific scenario, you can always book time with me, a coaching session, and that is the last step. I encourage you to do all of the free things. Every free thing available long before you ever book a time with me. But I can guarantee you that the first question out of my mouth when we sit down for that coaching session, especially if it's resume, is, have you gone through my content? Do not pay for anything from anybody until you have exhausted every free resource that exists out there. This is vastly different than when I came up in this industry. Like, there weren't as much free resources as there are today. It's amazing how many free resources. And this is it right here. Like if you want certs, if you've got a job that will pay for a cert, you better abuse the hell out of it. And make no mistakes. Come talk to me and I'll help you abuse the hell out of it. Right? Your company should be paying for your certs. You should not. I think it's an absolute travesty when you have to pay for things that your company says you need to be successful. And this is a very valid question. With all that being said, how do you get past the HR firewall that says only candidates with X certifications happen? You have to mentally realize that you can't control that some company is looking for a unicorn. That's right. That's what I said. Remember, a job posting is a wish list. And if they've already got it in their head that they only want somebody with OSCP, or they only want somebody with CPTS, or they only want somebody with OSCE, right? If they only want that, you're never going to get in the door. But you also have to realize that that's not a reflection of you. That's not a reflection of whether you're good enough or not. That's not a reflection of whether you should go get a cert or not. That's not a reflection of any of that stuff. The only thing it's a reflection of is their inability to think outside the box on who they want to bring into their organization. And you really have to ask yourself at this point in time, is that really a company you want to be a part of? If they're that narrow-minded, if they're that naive, like, is that really what you want? Do you really want to be in an environment that's that terrible? Like, take some agency over the company you want to work for and ask yourself, if they only want people with OSCE, do you want to be a part of that elitist mentality the whole time you're working there? Right? Like, I don't have a problem with companies putting on there what it is that they want. What I have a problem with is you as a job seeker who thinks that because you don't fit their mold of a unicorn, it's somehow your fault. That's the problem that I have. That you put the onus on yourself, that if some company is looking for a unicorn, somehow you're responsible for that. Move on. Find somebody that does listen, and so I'll tell a story because that's what I do here, right? I was just at the AI compliance conference. I was meeting with some CEOs, and I was chatting with one CEO. They are formerly McKinsey, so like I worked for PwC. They're considered the big four. There is actually like a big three, right, where it's like McKinsey and Bain and companies like that, right? So there's people even higher than like the PwC, the KPMGs of the world. And when I told this person at McKinsey knew my history, right? Knew I was former Air Force, knew I was PwC, knew I was Abbott, Mondelez, and now I'm, CISO for a startup. And somehow we got on the conversation of degrees and college life and things like that. All this because we were at Boston University, right, for the conference. We were talking about college life. And I said, I've never been to college. And it was dead silent at the table. And they all looked at me and they're like, you don't have a college degree? And I was like, no, I don't have a college degree. Never needed one. Got everywhere I got to because of grit, hustle, proving that I can get the job done. And I'm talking, I worked for companies like Abbott, 135 years old, the most traditional conservative place in the entire world that you could imagine. Right? PwC, the stuffiest accountants in the entire world. Right? I got there because I found people who were willing to hire me on merit, hire me on proof of my ability to execute the role and not based anything on whatever piece of paper I did or did not have. So The moral of the story there is don't think that you have to fit into somebody else's box to get a job, because there is somebody out there with a box that they do have that fits you, and you just haven't found it yet. With that being said, I absolutely love chatting with you, but I've got to go do my day job. I'm sure I've got tons of Slack messages of people wanting to chat with me this morning as well. As always, I absolutely appreciate hanging out with you all for Tea with a Hacker. I have no idea what next week's stream schedule looks like because I haven't sat down with the team to figure it out, but we will be streaming next week. I guarantee you that. The goal is definitely always at a minimum Tea with a Hacker next Friday. Make sure you're in Discord, hit that Discord in chat, head on over to our Discord server. Make sure you do turn into my social media account so you can follow me on socials. Give a huge shout out and thanks to everybody on Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, X, Twitch, YouTube. I think that's all the channels, who are watching me from all across the globe every day and every week. Send me a DM if you need to. Stay awesome. Stay awesome. I do appreciate it. Whether you're on the red side or the blue side, we're still deciding. Keep learning, and I'll see you next time.